Okay, it is 8 o'clock this morning, and this is Doug Beach, and I'm going to be standing in for Ann today. Um, we- Ann had a family thing she needed to take care of, so she'll be joining us maybe as we move along here. But we're still getting some people in. I'm going to change something here. Um, this morning, we're going to continue on our series on mental health in our community. And we're fortunate to have Todd Weatherly with us today. Todd is in Asheville, and I'm going to let Todd introduce himself in just a moment. But part of what uh, I found Todd through by working with Virgil Stucker, and Todd is part of that firm. We've met and visited with Virgil about 6 years ago on therapeutic communities that exist in the United States and ones that they've worked on. And so Todd is going to talk to us this morning about the work that he does. And so, Todd, I want to turn it over to you and let you introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
Right on. Well, howdy, folks. I'm Todd Weatherly, and it's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to share my screen here, and I'll have a little bit of an introduction for myself, and we'll get going. I want to give everybody time for questions and things like that. So let me
As
just
I missed one thing, Todd.
sure, go
Before we
ahead,
get started,
please.
is there anybody that has an announcement that you need to make this morning? If you do, if you want to put it in the chat, or just raise your hand and to go ahead and make the announcement. So I'm looking to see if anybody has anything they want to announce. If not, let's go ahead, Todd.
Very good. Let's make technology work for us, shall we? Can everybody see that screen? What do you folks see?
Yes,
Good.
I can see it.
Very good. Well, again, I'm glad to be here at the intersection. I like that name, therapy communities and recovery campuses. Something that and I'll just let's see here. Hold on. That's me. I'm Todd Weatherly, and I've been a therapeutic consultant now for about a decade. Most people don't know what that is, so I'm going to take a minute to tell you. But basically, we run in between all the gaps that exist in a lot of the care models out in communities and things like that, which is why I think that this topic is really important. And I try to bring this information to as many groups as I can, so that people are aware. Because I think that in the spirit of community, part of our problem are silos. People live in silos. They get isolated, and whether they're professionals or they're people in need of care, they find themselves limited by the resources, and those resources are not connecting to one another. Hear me okay?
Yes.
Let's see here. So, navigating the treatment matrix is one of the biggest issues. And what we do is I have those big words there. We live in the gaps. My group of folks, my group of professionals, we serve as many as 100 clients a year. So part of what that means is that we get to see the transitions that people make, but we see it person after person after person. One person, they work with a family member, or their family member is trying to get care for themselves. A person's trying to get care for themselves. They get to see one or maybe two people that are going through kind of the stages from crisis into a really good community care model. And but they don't see enough of it to really see the matrix that exists. It's kind of the Wild West out there. It's not it's not a well-designed system. It's not an integrated system, and so trying to work with folks and programs to bring a system or a model together that does work. That's what we do. So we got families through the recovery process. And we've got some background noise. I don't know if we want to get somebody to mute there. We can mute everybody, I think.
Okay, I'll mute mine.
Here we go. Um, so we identified treatment path as suitable resources, support clients in progressive stages of care, navigate complex behavioral health challenges. We serve ages 12 to 65 plus. Um, and one of the things that we do to kind of really get a 10,000-foot view of what care really looks like for folks that find themselves challenged by mental illness or substance use problems or co-occurring conditions of some kind is we travel extensively. We visit as a team over 200 programs a year. We travel all over the country, and the thing that affords us is we get to see, what's the best treatment for this condition. Where's the where are the people that are doing it the best in the country? What new treatment models are on the horizon? What person is really kind of brought things together in a model or in a way that causes people to be really successful. We get to see the highest order success, and in many ways, we also get to see the failures that are out there as well. And we get to kind of look at a bird's eye view of what's happening in our country with regard to treatment. And that gives us the information we need to be able to put it together into a model that works. So there we go. So today, I just want to identify levels of care continuum, measures for assuring continuity, and talk about what makes a care community for creating long-term success. Hopefully, what you'll have after the end of this presentation is a framework for treatment for a person's recovery journey, and look at how it takes a care community to make it all work. So, um, I think everybody who has a connection to mental health will kind of appreciate this picture here. This is a series of pictures. I tried to type in a condition, and Google or AI. These are the images they provided for me from various, for a person who suffers from OCD to schizophrenia to eating disorder to ASD. These are the pictures that it threw out at me. And so identifying a problem without identifying with it. One of the biggest issues, the first thing we got to do is let's talk about what the problem is. Why is this person having these challenges? What is the condition that they're struggling with? So much so that we can give them the help that they need, but not so much that they identify with it. That people oftentimes get the stamp of a condition, and they are not given the care that they need. People dismiss them. We run into the way that people treat mental health. They try to keep an arm's length away from it. And somebody with a serious condition, you've got a lot of stigma that's out there for people that are suffering from conditions, and what they need is help, and what they get is less than helpful. So, and then there's the person. People who will also be given a diagnosis, and they'll identify with that diagnosis. Well, you're not your diagnosis. You know, I have heartburn. I don't walk around. That's not the first thing I tell people about myself is having heartburn. Regardless of how serious a condition you may have, medical or mental or otherwise, you shouldn't have to. It's not all that you are. It may be something that you manage. It may be a part of your life, but it's not all that you are. And for a person to identify with a condition so much so that it's hard for them to see themselves as a person outside of their condition, they also get treated that way by our care community largely in a lot of communities, is that they get treated as a person. They get treated as a condition, not as a person. Their condition comes first, and their personhood comes second, which is why you'll hear it in my language, and I don't hear it anymore, but most people, when I talk about a person who suffers from mental health challenges, not a schizophrenic, not an addict, not a I don't use what their diagnosis is as the way to identify them. They're a person who suffers from this condition, from this challenge. That's the way, and that lives in my language, but it doesn't live in our world's language. So part of that is a correction we have to do around that. But The other big problem is that because of that, you get a lot of people that get misdiagnosed. They get poor care because they don't have people that are really looking at them as a person and seeing the condition for what it is. Instead, they're trying to immediately see a condition, find a medicine, whatever immediate solution they can find and move them on their way. It's a very doesn't take time to really give you the care that you need kind of system. So how do we fix that? What do we do? Well, you've got all kinds of things that happen to people. A lot of these become gateways, but the stuff that happen, legal and financial, medical, staffing, family communication, resources, you got all these things that have to come together in order for a person to get the right care. Otherwise, they end up, these are the things that happen to them. They have a relapse, they have a break, they get hospitalized, they get incarcerated. They're having symptoms that can't be managed. They don't get the right kind of meds. They isolate. They're having suicidal thoughts, but they're afraid to tell anyone. So, because they don't want to get put in the hospital. And for anybody who's had a family member or themselves been through the hospital system, you understand why. It's a traumatic experience for a person. They don't want to do that. So, but they still need help. How do they get it? Um, Putting all these things together in a concerted way and making it so that it's navigable, so that a person can get that care. It can be challenging. So, but it's possible. The thing is that we can actually do really good mental health care in this country. We can really do it. We know how to do it. We have the resources to do it. So all the excuses that I hear about community mental health or why people are struggling in the streets, I don't believe any of the excuses because I know that we know how. And part of it's because they've never seen a model that worked before. That's what I'd like to bring to you. So a lot of times people will go at it and they'll use the Google consultant again. There's all these factors, crisis centers and therapists and psychologists and assessment centers and interventionists and hospitals, the whole 9 yards of people that are trying to navigate the system. In the background, this is my favorites bar, my file folder, and my saved links for treatment facilities. And you can just look at the list there on the side and me just clicking through it. And those are just the programs that I have some connection to or know about. They are, I'll point at it here. You'll see this going through. That is not even close to the number of resources that are out there. How does a person even look at that and understand what it is? I mean, I look at it and I get overwhelmed. My goodness, and I'm a professional. So, at any rate, so many pregos, so little information. So this is step number one. You want condition treatment alignment. You want a person's condition and the treatment that they receive to match. There, you can look at the DSM. This is just samples in the background of the DSM, which is the tool that they use for identifying conditions. It's not the best tool because it's very negatively focused. The positive psychology is another piece out there, but this is very negatively focused. But that's how they identify conditions. It is good because it does give us a way to follow a treatment path. So this is the piece that I always try to bring to folks is the goal is for a person to achieve and sustain their highest level of independence, satisfaction, and fulfillment possible. For a person coming out of a crisis, that process can take nearly 2 years of progressive levels of care. Not always. Every person is different. Every person needs different resources, but for a person to come out of crisis, you've got crisis stabilization centers and hospitals. Those are the highest levels of care. You've got residential treatment centers that can last anywhere from 30 to 90 days. You've got, after that, PHP, partial hospitalization, sometimes with housing, sometimes not. 5 days a week, usually lasts 8 weeks. IOP, 3 days a week, usually lasts 6 to 8 weeks. And then for a person who's really getting back on their feet, stabilizing on some kind of medication regimen and pulling all the resources together, even a supported living environment for 6 months at least is really the indicated level of care. People don't think about care in this way. They're like, how long is it going to take? If you were to go to your doctor for any condition, they say, hey, any serious condition, they say, hey, follow this protocol. You, ideally you'd follow it. People who do follow it have the best chance of success and recovery. For a person who's suffering from a mental health condition, the success in their recovery is find the right thing to do and the right providers and the right community of people and do it for long enough for it to stick. But it looks like this. Like it's not a straight, this is 1,000 bikes that were sent on their own. And sometimes they fall over immediately, and sometimes they make it the distance. The things that cause a person to make it the distances, they stick to the plan that they're given, and they have a community of providers that's talking to one another. They have family members that support, they have community supports, they have a good doctor who talks to the therapist, who talks to the coach, who talks to maybe the housing person. These teams are integrated and they talk to one another. That makes it a community of care. Most of the care becomes a siloed approach. They don't get the right kind of care because none of their care people are talking to one another. If you got a person like me, I'm making sure that they do. If you've got a program that does the right work, a community-based program, that's what they're designed to do. They've got coaches, they've got community, they've got places where people eat, they have opportunities for people to feel fulfilled, but they also have all the care elements that are coordinated around one another. Care manager, therapist, psychiatrist, or doc, they're all talking to one another. So those are all the things that people have to kind of manage even when they get into community they land. It can be overwhelming. This slide is designed to be overwhelming. So really having a care plan, really having people that are helping you look at what's going on for you, really having something that, because I tell you, living independently, my teenage children, my adult children will tell you it's not easy. Even for a person without a condition, they have to manage. For a person who has to manage a condition, this is a lot to put together at once. So having a plan and having something you follow and community of people that are surrounding you so that you can stay on the straight and narrow and stay on a path and lead a normal life, whatever your normal life looks like. That's what we're after. And I do have cases of, I do have, one thing I'll do when this presentation goes for an hour is I'll talk about real live cases of people who have been able to land into a care configuration, if you will. Maybe it's not a program, but they've got providers that are around them and people that they can trust and, a job that they like and all these other things. I've got success stories. I usually bring those to the table and we talk about them, but I'm glad to take some questions because I know we're limited on time.
So, Todd, we have one comment here in chat. This is fantastic. Are the care programs culturally aware? How can an agency like ours be able to set up a referral system which allows warm handoffs and collaborative care management?
Oh, yeah, I like that question. Well, um, I think that, like I say, the thing that I get to do is travel. So I get to go out and see a bunch of people. But I think one of the best ways is to kind of start talking to as many care providers as you can lay your hands on. Like, if you had this case, what is it that you would do? What is a person like this gonna, you'll eventually find people, you can call me if you like, but you'll eventually find people who, well, I know about this place or this program or this thing across the state line or this place down the way. Suddenly you'll start to discover resources that you didn't know you were there. Most of what we have to do for families and people needing care is help them connect the resources that they've already got around them and make sure that those resources are talking to one another. If you become that person who's like, hey, I know a person and a guy and a someone and the program and a something else, like when you become that person, you become invaluable. So connecting to resources both locally and or as broadly as you possibly can. I know that not everybody's role affords them the ability to do that. That is part of the problem. But connecting to as many resources as you can only helps. That's not the whole answer to that question, but it's part of it.
One of the things you just mentioned is that is the length of time, 2 years, to go through this process. And that's one of the issues that we find where people, with the insurance the way it is today, people can stay in the hospital for 14 days, but there's a gap, after you leave the hospital. And I know that's what you're talking about. What have other communities done to help build these bridges and make this financially viable for families and individuals?
I see. So there's first episode in crisis centers are models. I'm sorry to say we lost a lot of our clubhouse models out there. There are a few still left, but the clubhouse model was a really good one. The only problem about a clubhouse model is there's no housing. So communities that have found a way to provide housing, because housing is care. Housing is absolutely essential for people. If you think about it from the standpoint of Maslow's hierarchy, there's, safety and food and shelter and everything else is at that bottom layer. If they haven't got that bottom layer done, they're not doing anything about their recovery. None of the rest of it works. So if they're not in a stable situation where they can be fed and housed and clothed and receive the care that they need, one of the things that for successful communities, there's a few out there, is they were able to house the people that had the need. We've got a pretty innovative program here. It's being run by a church, which is a nonprofit, but they're running a hardest to house kind of program, and they're kind of reaching out to people who are of greatest need. And, it took them several years to get it together, but they're now starting to place people into their housing, and it works. We just have more people than they can serve. Of course, that's part of our issue, but the program works because one thing, in order to receive care, you got to be findable. Got to know where you are. And if I don't know where you are, it makes it very difficult.
Other questions? One thing, Todd, you mentioned housing, and at NAMI in San Antonio, that's probably the number one or number two request that we get, and the lack of available housing for people who have a serious mental illness, but who can live independently or semi-independently. That availability of housing is just scarce. And it seems that housing programs are really focused on, quote unquote, homelessness without necessarily focusing on serious mental illness. You mentioned one model. Do you see other models around that where housing is more available?
Yeah, not many, but we have the same problem that you're struggling with here. Where housing available, it does work, but I think it's out in, is it in Oregon? There's a program out in Oregon. Part of what they said is like, yeah, instead of giving a person a case manager, we just house them. It's cheaper. In the end, it's cheaper to house a person so that they can provide the care for them instead of incarcerating them and hospitalizing them and chasing after them when they're homeless and all these other things that happen for a person. It is literally cheaper to do it right than it is to do it the way that we're doing it. So, like I say, the using money as an excuse to me is not really a viable excuse because while you may have to put investment into it, so your initial year for doing anything that looks like good programming is going to cost up front. But if you look at it over a period of years, it's going to save tremendous amounts of community dollars without question. The math is not even hard to put together.
Todd, do you have models that an example of communities that have provided the housing and what the cost savings have been?
Um, there are a few out there. I could always dig them out and put those in front of folks. But I tell you, the funny thing is that we did this already. Um, One of the best models is the ones that we were working on in the 70s. So we had deinstitutionalization in the early 70s, but hospitals, which, they let people out of hospitals, they established, it must be a harm to self or others as the bar you have to cross to need emergency care. Prior to that, even here, we had hospitals that were doing levels of care. They had step down levels. They had outpatient centers. They had a community model that they were operating on prior to the 70s. So, the thing is that we've already seen a model that works. We just threw it in the trash. So because Medicaid came in, and then when Medicaid came in and did kind of managed care and tried to put parameters around treatment periods, they used medical treatment periods to go around mental health care, which do not work. We all know that already. So, in order for one of the things that we could do to see an influx is to get insurance to actually start paying for the condition that they've been, instead of denying mental health care all the time. That's a completely other topic, but that's one solution that we could have to this problem. Um, if those resources were there, I think we could channel other resources towards housing, you know. So there's a way to do it. The model's not hard. It really isn't. But I could dig out numbers and resources and quote statistics and everything else. If you want to see those things, I'm glad to send it to this group, but they're all over the place. They're not hard to find.
So when you look at communities that have done this successfully, is there a secret sauce there in terms of getting people to work together across the community? Because that seems to be a big part of the issue is getting all the different agencies, nonprofits, uh, governmental organizations to come together. Have you seen a good model for that?
Usually, in my experience, it takes either a person or group of persons to champion that cause. Somebody's got to believe in it pretty strongly and have time. So you're also talking about a person or persons who are volunteering their time to to advocate and put things together. But it's an uphill battle right now. Um, and the people that I've seen do it successfully, what they for whatever reason, they were in a position that they didn't have to work for a living and they could dedicate their time towards, or they had some kind of resource that maybe it was a position that paid for it, but they championed some cause and they successfully tied into funding that whether it's nonprofit level funding, a donor or some person like that, seems to be at the head of a lot of things that start to work because a person has to, they still got to make a living being out there using their time. So that's one of the hurdles to have to do, have to get past. A good fundraiser might be the thing, might be the answer to that question.
We have one comment from Kendra that says there have been numerous studies that show it's physically responsible to engage in housing first models. Amen. We are just about at time. Are there any other questions before we close out? Or comment? Todd, do you have any parting thoughts?
Well, it's been a pleasure to speak to you folks this morning, even if briefly. You have my contact information if you want to carry on a conversation in another time. I also have a podcast, so if you're interested in jumping on the podcast with me, Head Inside Mental Health is the name of the podcast. I'd love to have you.
Thank you so much for your time today, sir. That is something we've been working so hard in San Antonio is to promote housing first. God bless you.
And you too.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Doug,
Todd.
Doug, you're muted.
Todd, I want to thank you presentation this morning, and you had a lot of great wisdom for us, and we'll look with you again.
Be well.